Hello, can you hear me? Perfect. Good evening and welcome to the 2025 Cleveland Kurentovanje. I'm Nicole Cusul-Matheo from the festival, and we are so happy to have you today for a conversation with two of Cleveland's most influential Slovenian-Americans, the Consul General of Slovenia in Cleveland, Suzana Češarek, and former Ohio State Senator Kenny Yuko. We are here today at the American Mutual Life Association office in Cleveland, Ohio. And this is a new background for us. And we will also have the president of AMLA, Tim Perchich, tell us more about why we are here and some of the cool historic things that have happened here in the past. Tonight promises to be a inspiring conversation, and we want to thank our sponsors this year for making this event possible. Our presenting sponsors this year are the American Mutual Life Association, Destination Cleveland, Shaliga Drug. We want to thank all of our sponsors for their contributions in making events like today possible. Cleveland Kurentovanje is supported in part by the residents of Cuyahoga County through a public grant from the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Thank you. Cleveland Kurentovanje is also made possible in part by an investment of public funds from the Ohio Arts Council, the OAC. The OAC is a state agency that funds and supports quality arts experiences to strengthen Ohio communities culturally, educationally, and economically. Thank you. And finally, thank you to one of our third grantor, I should say, the Office of Slovenians Abroad, for your financial support of Kurentovanje. Hvala lijepa. I also want to give a very big thank you to all of our partner organizations this year who have helped make programming like today possible. Without further ado, let's hear more about where we're at here at the American Mutual Life Association.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this wonderful presentation. My name is Tim Persick, President of the American Mutual Life Association, formerly the Slovenska Dobrodelna zveza, which is like the Slovenian Mutual Life Association. We're a fraternal benefit society located here in Northeast Ohio, and this venue that we're in has a bit of historic significance. In 1991-92, when Slovenia was vying for its independence, one of the key processes there was to get governments like the United States to recognize them as a free and independent country. There was a group of United Americans for Slovenia that met in this very room and did letter campaigns, phone banks to call out to different politicians and people in leadership positions. And it was basically the community coming together right here in our headquarters to make an impact, to do a little bit to help Slovenia on its way to independence. It's all part of the AMLA's mission statement to preserve the heritage and language of Slovenia. And so without further ado, I'll let you meet our guests and enjoy the presentation. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to all the viewers of tonight's discussion. Welcome, Kenny.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. So I am Suzana Češarek. I'm the Consul General of Slovenia in Cleveland. I arrived in Cleveland in September. And this is going to be my first Kurentovanje event, and I'm very excited about it. The Kurent Jump happened yesterday, and I'm sure all the events until Saturday will be as exciting as it was yesterday. This is the first podcast we are doing, and we chose Kenny Yuko to be our first guest because there are like several reasons why we decided to do that. First, his father is Slovenian, so he grew up in a Slovenian home. He has been a politician with so many rich experiences, but above all, he has high personal values that I think it's important that we share them with future generations. And let's start with your Slovenian heritage, Kenny. Your grandparents came to America as migrants, and I understand it was not easy for them to integrate in this country. Tell us a little bit more about how this maybe influenced you as a kid, or what did you hear from them was their migrant experience?
Well, thank you, Susanna. They came over. My grandfather was born in 1897 and came over about 7-8 years later, wound up in Johnstown or Uniontown, I can't remember which one came first, working with the coal miners. And the coal miners were not an easy job. And he started out very young and eventually got involved with a little bit of union organizing. And of course, that's not the way to go when you're working for the coal miners in Pennsylvania. So he lost his job, came to Cleveland, and through the help of his Slovenian friends, found employment through a good friend, Eddie Kennick, who a lot of people from the Cleveland area recognize him as one of the tremendous singing voices in Cleveland. And Eddie Kennick helped him get a job at Willard Battery, till Willard Battery moved out of Cleveland, and then my grandfather retired. But they grew up in Pennsylvania, and we see the pictures, and they look like two fellows who just came over from the old country. My dad and his two brothers growing up. I can remember visiting in very poor conditions, hearing the stories. They went through the Depression, the Great Depression from the 1920s. I gave my dad a great appreciation for food until my mom passed, actually. About once a year, we used to have cabbage soup, where basically my mom took one big potato and an onion and maybe a carrot and split it up for the 6 of us to eat. Very similar to what my dad grew up with growing up, because they didn't have any food during the Depression. Told the stories of buying 5-cent day-old pies, you know, just to help feed the family. My grandfather worked in factories. My grandmother worked cleaning houses just so they can make ends meet. At one point in time, my dad dropped out of school and took a job at Lincoln Electric when they were still on Coit Avenue, and started out there cleaning around the machines. Eventually became a machinist and kept on working his way up, worked his way up into management, and retired, I think, 40-some years later with quite a history racked up behind him. And so we saw what happened when your family grows up and you see the way your parents treat people. They're caring, they're respectful, they're kind. Everybody loves them, and they want to share whatever they have with other people, because they know what it's like to live without. And that's the way my parents taught us to be. Always be kind, always be respectful, always help others, and be giving. And you just take that trend and you move it on with all of your future endeavors. And so whether you're playing drums in a polka band, whether you're in retailing, you're in construction, you're union organizing, or if you're being a politician, if you follow those guidelines, you'd be surprised how success kind of follows and gravitates to you.
So it was important for your family to, not for you, but for your parents and grandparents, to integrate in America. How much of the old country of Slovenia did they bring with them? Did they speak Slovenian, or did they just try to get American as soon as possible?
Yeah, my grandparents didn't speak Slovenian to my dad and his brothers, and I think that what my dad kind of explained to me was, when he came over here, he learned English, but he still had an accent, and people made fun of him, and that hurt him because he wanted to be part of the group, and all of a sudden they're isolating him because he spoke with a little different accent. So they kept the Slovenian language out of their growing up. So obviously when we grew up, the only Slovenian language we heard was when Frankie Yankovic would sing a Slovenian song on polka varieties, and that was about it.
And would you say that music was like the biggest part of Slovenian heritage that you were experiencing as a kid?
Absolutely. You know, everyone loves music. Everyone loves polka music, and even the waltzes tell a nice story. And my dad was a polka fanatic. My Irish mom learned how to dance the polka immediately after starting to date my father. And those two were just, it was a couple made in heaven. From the day they met to the time mom passed and dad passed, they were meant to be together. But they loved their music. I laughed because I said in the 50s when American Bandstand came on, and that was the craze. Rock and roll was the craze in America, and every family was talking about American Bandstand. At our house, it was polka varieties, and there was no news about it. We weren't allowed to watch TV at dinner time. That was a no-no, except on Sundays at 1 o'clock when polka varieties came on. Dad would bring the portable TV into the kitchen, hook the wire, rabbit ears, hook them up, and we got to watch polka varieties while we had dinner.
We will talk about music later, but let's go to your political career now. So you retired as a state senator. You were minority leader for 5 years?
6 years.
6 years. And you were in Ohio House of Representatives for 7 years.
8 years.
8 years, sorry, I got everything wrong. So tell us, how did you first get interested into politics? It was way before your career really started, wasn't it?
My interest in politics goes back to when John F. Kennedy was running for president, and my mom being an Irish Catholic woman, she supported him. I went to a Catholic grade school, and the nun decided, and back in those days, keep in mind now too, our grades were like 54 to 56 kids per classroom, and we had 4 classrooms per grade because we were part of the baby boomers. So there were an awful lot of kids there, but our particular nun was going to mirror something that John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon did with their campaign and their debates and whatnot. So she put all the different names in a hat. We picked pieces of paper out of the hat, and then when we finished, we all stood up and read who we were going to be. I picked John F. Kennedy, something I didn't look forward to, but she said, that's what you were picked and that's what you're going to be. And it was a lot of fun. And I went home and told my mom, and my mom gave me all kinds of campaign buttons of John F. Kennedy, about the size of a dime. You put them on your shirt. I still have them to today. They're in this shadow box in my basement office. And it's just a lot of fun. So we got involved in politics. I got involved with the union much later, back in '75. And when I got involved with the union, and became an officer in 1980, went to go down to Columbus every month for district council meetings, and we'd hear about some of the things that were going on in Columbus that were not favorable for labor unions. And at one point in time, I said, you know, one of us have to sit back and retire and run for office and let all our union members support them, get them elected so we'll have a strong union voice in the State House. And I raised my hand, and I thought it was a great idea. The other voices I heard would say, we make the motion to adjourn and go to the bar, and guess who won? Wasn't me. So, but I did go home that day from Columbus, went back to the Union Hall, found out I could retire in 2 years. Our current state representative at the time was going to be term limited in 2 years. And I said, I'm going to retire, and I will run for state representative, and I will be the voice for labor. And that's how I got started.
So how did the experiences as being a union organizer for 30 years, right, help you with your political career?
You know, it set up such a tremendous foundation, because what it taught me very easily is, number one, you can't get anywhere doing everything by yourself. So if I negotiated the best labor contract and got all my union members the best money and the best benefits, if they weren't working, they were just as good as some guy off the street who had nothing. So I realized that right off the bat that we had to work together, we had to be kind, we had to be respectful, and that what we would accomplish in the end is we would hopefully get better productivity, less absenteeism, no grievances, and better wages and better working conditions and benefits. And it worked out to me for 25 years. We did that. And I think we did a very great job of getting people decent wages, decent health care, retirement benefits, and training, job training. We had grievance procedures, but we rarely used them because we didn't have to. We worked very closely with our members and management, and it led a great way for me to translate from there and segue into politics, whereas a member of the minority party, you're always dealing with the majority party, which is challenging in itself. But I learned from very on that if you're kind to people, you're respectful, and you're willing to work together, negotiate, you compromise, you can both come out winners. And that's exactly what we did. And that was my reputation for 8 years in the House, and that was definitely my reputation for 8 years in the Senate, 6 from being minority leader.
So what led you then to run for the Senate?
Well, after the House, you can only serve for 4 terms, and there are 2-year terms in the Ohio House, and then you have to leave. You could go to the Senate, but the Senate seat was already had a Senate sitting in that position, and she had 2 more years to go on that term, and then she could have run for another 4-year term, which meant for the next 6 years she would have the seat locked up. So I retired from politics after 8 years in the House, but then she called me up and said she wanted to run for Secretary of State, and she asked me to please run for her Senate seat. So I did. Immediately announced I was running for the Senate seat, and I did that, and obviously I was successful.
So what would you say in terms of policies adopted during your political career in the House and the Senate were the most impactful for the people?
For the people, boy, just, you know what, Suzanne, so much people don't realize when you talk about what we did as a government body, but when we're talking about education, for example, it's our kids we're talking about. So even if we're not talking to the adults, when we're talking about education, it's their families they're talking about. They want their kids to get a good education. We want to make sure that everyone had a fair opportunity to get a good education. So we would take education issues, health care, a very important issue. Not everybody has health care plans. And when people get sick, we have to take care of them. Mental health issues come by. I don't know of a family around that doesn't have somebody in their family who has somebody with some type of mental health issues. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, we rarely talked about it. But nowadays, it's becoming more acceptable, you know, to talk about you have loved ones that have a problem. You see with the AA programs and drug programs, and people with autism, et cetera, they're more accepting of the people that don't exactly look or talk or act like us. So everything we did, two of my biggest bills that I worked on was to bring in the casinos to Ohio, which created an awful lot of revenue. At 53% of all the revenue from the 4 casinos was distributed between the 88 counties. And that brought a tremendous amount of money for the counties to spend at a time in their government where we were almost in a financial crisis. They appreciated those dollars coming in, and they were big dollars. That also opened the door for 7 racinos, which generated, again, 53% of the revenue was shared with our public schools. And it helped our schools stay away from tax levies that are just a burden on the families. And what we wanted to do is make sure we didn't create more burdens on our working families than what we had to. And then you look at everything else that we did. When you worked on the transportation budget, make sure we have good, straight, strong roads that we can work on. When we tried to when the Euclid Square Mall closed down not too long ago, and we're looking at how we can replace them, and we're looking at Amazon moving in there, well, they're constantly moving trucks in and out. They want to make sure our roads are good, strong, and good conditions, because they're spending an awful lot of money on trucks. So you put together a good transportation budget. Everything in the budget is for a good reason, and it's a tremendous responsibility legislators have to make sure those dollars are well spent, and they benefit basically everybody.
You mentioned that you had good relationship with the Republican Party that was in the position. So why do you think it was possible for you to have good relationship and then also manage to work as a team? And why is that not possible maybe in these days?
I think the political climate in itself is almost in a crisis. And I was very fortunate when I first became Senate Minority Leader that Larry Ophoff would be the Senate President. And I'm not sure what nationality Larry is, but I know his wife's a Slovenian, so I knew I had a good in with him. And but Larry and I worked together, and I just approached him from a standpoint that let's work together, and let's be kind, and let's be respectful. And I said, I'm an old-time union negotiator, so let's negotiate. When we see a bill that's out there, and you want to get it passed, I can help you get that passed and make it look good because both sides agreed to it, or a portion of it. But at the same time, some of our stuff could be put in there through amendments, etc. We worked together hand in hand on so many issues. We passed the state budget unanimously, which is not an easy thing to do. And he was very accepting when I went to him and asked, for assistance for my members. If they wanted to get a bill heard, out of committee, have him put a little pressure on the committee chairman. If once it passed out of committee, if I can put a little pressure on the Senate President to bring it to the Senate floor for a vote. It's all politics, and it's not always easy, but we were always very successful. Not always successful, but for a good portion of it we were. And it's just by working together.
Do you have any regrets when it comes to your political career?
No, the only regret I have is that we didn't change term limits, so I could have kept staying on because I enjoyed what I did. I think we did a good job at what we were given the directions to do. It's not easy, I can tell you that. Being a minority party is very frustrating at times because they don't, with the supermajority in the Ohio government, they didn't need our votes for anything, but yet we want our voices to be heard. And I also want to make sure that we were representing our people well and our constituents. And we did just that. We brought things back to our districts. We had a meeting with our Eastern European Commission, and we held it in Euclid, our first one away from the State House. And we invited our Euclid mayor to be there and say a few words. And she talked about the fact that they named a park they're just building, Senator Kenny Yuko Park. They named the street where I was born and raised in Euclid, Kenny Yuko Way, and the library card has my picture on it. You don't get that because you're Slovenian or you were born in Euclid. You did that because you did a good job when you were in office. And when you did a good job because you worked with people on both sides of the aisle. We always had good relationships with the governor and the higher-ups that were in office at the time. And again, you do it by being respectful all the time. You don't go doing these press conferences where you're slamming people. You see it all the time on TV. It's not the way to get things done. Work together, be kind, be respectful, and be surprised at the results you achieve.
Yes, I wanted to actually speak about Euclid Park next, so thank you, Kenny.
Good segue.
And in the news report, I read your statement that when the park was opened, you said that the park stands for being kind, for being respectful, and treating people like you want to be treated, and when you do that, good things happen. That was exactly what you said.
Yep.
So tell us, how was it growing up in Euclid? Tell us about your childhood memories and how the Slovenian spirit was felt around the houses.
Well, we grew up on Tracy Avenue. It was a very unique time. I was born in 1950. We had Models Market at the end of the street, so during the afternoon, Mom would make a phone call to the Models Market and order supper for us for dinner because our freezer at home was about the size of a shoebox, and that was saved for ice cube trays for my dad for his Pepsi when he came home from work. and maybe a box of frozen corn or peas, and the whole freezer was filled up. So Mom would call ahead, give us the money. We'd walk down the street, give the butcher the money. He'd give us a package of beef or whatever, and we'd walk home and give it to her. We grew up in a small little bungalow. We had what we called Slovenian air conditioning in the summer. That's when you open the front door and you open the back door and you pray for a breeze, because we couldn't afford air conditioning. Didn't lock the doors. We knew all our neighbors. After dinner in the summertime, Dad loved to go for his walks, and he'd walk around the block, and you couldn't walk around the block one time without running into 6, 7, 8 people playing accordion or banjo or bass or whatever, and not all at one house. It'd be all different houses in the driveway. And we'd stop and listen to our music for a little bit and how nice it was. Playing in the park and everything. It was an unbelievable thing. Keep in mind, though, that was post-World War II. And the atmosphere and the feelings in our country were very strong. We felt like we participated in a world war, and we won. And we protected freedom for all of us. And I think the feelings were pretty high and pretty good. We all flew the American flag on every holiday. There are many of us who flew our flags every day, but respectfully, we put it out in the morning and brought it in at the nighttime. Our next door neighbor, Joe, used to not only do that, but he used to give the salute to the flag after he put it up. And that's the right way to grow up.
So you mentioned the music. So did your father expect you to play the button box?
My father would have loved it if I played the button box. My brother did. And when my son was just a little 2, 3, or 4-year-old or something, I can remember one time he was watching my brother John play that button box, and he wanted to play, so Johnny took an extra button box and put it on Rocky's lap, and Rocky sat there, and he was so proud that day because he thought he was playing the accordion, because Johnny was playing and music was coming out, so Rocky was taking half the credit. But I wanted to be a drummer. So I finally talked my dad into, I said, I'll buy my own drum set. And I said, maybe Johnny and I can start a polka band one day. But that didn't last too long. I wound up with some friends of mine from high school. Again, a bunch of Slovenians, Tony and John Potachnik. And their uncle played bass, I believe it was, for Yankovic Church, Cernik. And they were related. And Tony and John's mother grew up in Collingwood, right in a small block of area where my mom grew up as well. So they all knew each other. When we moved up from Euclid to Lyndhurst in 1958, I met Tony and John. John was already playing guitar. Tony was playing accordion. And later on, when I picked up the drums, we started a wedding band called the Ambassadors. We played polkas, we played some fast songs, and some standard old tunes that were played at. Did that for years until I switched into more of a rock and roll band, and I went into a nightclub act, basically.
And you were also a singer, right? At the Slovenia National Home reception?
I sang all over the place. Still sing. I sang at all my fundraisers, thanks to Rick and Shrona, who I always hired to provide entertainment for us. It was always a lot of fun. I told you the story one time when we were at Slovenian Home. We used to honor the man and the woman of the year for all the Slovenian homes. And what we would do is we would stand on the sideline, Councilman Mike Polensik and a few others, and they'd call us out one at a time to make presentations. We brought proclamations from the State House, in my case. And when they called my name out, I walked out on stage like I was lost. I'm looking up at the ceiling, looking around, and everyone's saying, what's wrong with this guy? And I get to the microphone, and I said, listen, I'm not sure if I'm in the right place or not. I said, so let me try something to make sure if I'm in the right place. And I looked at the audience, and I said, E-I-E-I-E-I-O, and the whole crowd responded with that E-I-E-I-O response. And then I said, now I know I'm in the right spot. And to this day, I still get, not as often as I used to get, but I still, probably 4 or 5 times a year, I get someone come by and say, I was there at Slovenian Home when you did that. And they thought that was fun. And we had a good time with that.
And you brought some CDs and records with you. Do you want to show us now, maybe?
We could do that. You know, some of these go back a long time ago that, you know, as my dad grew up, we listened to them. This is the Vadnals in Europe album, and they're not in any order, but another Vadnal. This is a one from Circle 2 when Cecilia Valenchik taught all the kids. They dressed up in Slovenian costumes. They sang the Slovenian songs. They did dances, etc. They put on concerts at Slovenian homes. We would go several times a year. They recorded this album. Joe Valensic, who I got to serve on as a commissioner in this Eastern European Commission, he gets a mention here for doing a duet with Debbie Vadnal. The Vadnal, Richie Vadnal, Johnny Vadnal orchestras that were so popular in Cleveland. Their kids are here, and you can pick them out with their bright blonde hair with no problem. And of course, we had Tony's Polka Village, Tony Pekosik, spokesperson for all Slovenians. Everyone knew Tony, everyone loved him. He did trips to Slovenia all the time. My parents went over there a couple times. They loved it. Here's an album from Eddie Kennick that he signed over to my mother, Georgine. Eddie Kennick was so highly respected by our family because he helped my grandfather when he first came to Cleveland. Johnny Vadnals, I think were in here somewhere, and just a bunch of polka records. And that represented like the old school Slovenian music that we heard. Then you move forward, and of course Yankovics too. I brought a bunch of Yankovic CDs to show you that the Slovenian music went from records to cassettes to 8-track, or it went to 8-tracks and to cassettes, wound up with CDs. This one in particular, Welcome to the Real Collinwood. This was a nice musical mix because it was half dedicated to the Italians that lived in Collinwood, and the other half was dedicated to the Slovenians who lived in Collinwood. It's preceded with a nice conversation with Tony Pekosik, representing the Slovenians, and he had songs from Yankovic, Johnny Vadnal, Eddie Habit, Johnny Pecan, and George Stadahar. And this taught me that, you know what, the groups were, instead of being separate, they were coming together. And we needed that to come together because our groups were getting smaller and smaller. We needed to keep this together. I also wanted to share with you a book that Richie and Elaine Vadnal brought back to me, and they signed it to me for 1971, and it's all about From Slovenia to America. And it was a tremendous read, and it taught me so much about the fact that we had more Slovenians here in like Euclid, Ohio, and Cleveland, Ohio, than they had in Slovenia just about. And the book started off with Governor Laushi, or Senator Laushi, writing the foreword, and it was so nice because, I mean, he was a legend in Cleveland, and always will be. And that's what we liked about it, the fact that we can take people from the past and bring them into the future, share that, number one, that we have a strong connection to Slovenia from Cleveland. Our former mayor in Cleveland, he took a group of people over to Slovenia. He did call and invite me, Frank Jackson, but unfortunately I was in the General Assembly at the time, and that was right at budget time, and there was no way I could have left the budget conversations to go to Slovenia for a week, but I wish I could have made that trip.
Maybe you can still go. But your grandfather did go before he died.
My dad took him back there. They had a wonderful time. The Vadnal band entertained. The Vadnals, Richie Vadnal was like the rock star group of America. When he went over there, large crowds everywhere. Everyone like mobbed the band. They just had a tremendous time. They would go with a group of 80, 90 people, and virtually none of them knew each other when they left. When they all came back, they're all best friends. And to this day, they're still best friends. And so many of the friends that my dad met on his first trip over to Slovenia that come back in Cleveland, of course, the group's getting smaller because a lot of them, their husbands died or their wives died, or sometimes they both died. But the connections that we have, these people aren't just family friends. They've become family. And it all started with that trip to Slovenia because the common bond was just so strong.
So how do you see the concept of nationality in the modern world with everything is globalized and faster paced and just different?
Well, because you have to have respect for where we came from. We can't keep moving forward if we don't look behind us once in a while and say, okay, where did we start? And we started with our grandparents or our great-grandparents coming from the old country, as they often said. They came over here, they started a new life. They wanted to make things better for their families than what they had over in Europe. The streets aren't all paved with gold, as some of them thought they were. And a lot of them experienced some really tough and trying and challenging times. But they stood together because they had their Slovenian homes, they had their Slovenian barbershops, their bakeries, their restaurants, and the camaraderie there. We had so many Slovenian restaurants here in our Cleveland area, and they're all falling by the wayside. Our Slovenian homes are falling by the wayside. Our Croatian homes and so many other nationality groups. We got to strengthen that back up again. We have to get with the polka music. So many of the records I brought today, people have passed on. But then you have like Joe Novak and friends, they're still playing strong. Joey Tomsic Orchestra, they're still playing strong. We have the Chardon Polka Band, and they kind of put a whole new twist to polka music. But you know what? It's fun, it's engaging, and he's getting the young people involved. Most people have no idea how to dance the polka, and they're learning once again, and that's nice. And they're learning what Petitsa is. They're learning when we have the Sausage Festival. This last year at the Sausage Festival, you were there. I can tell you one thing right now. you witnessed the largest crowd I have ever seen at that sausage festival. It was absolutely fantastic. The music was nonstop. It wasn't only on the stage inside. It was out in the grassy area too. Just musicians coming by, taking the accordion out of the case, or a banjo or a bass or whatever, and start playing together. And they weren't people who played in the band together. They were just musicians who all played with one another that day. And it was so much fun.
So music is what unites us.
Yeah, it really is.
So you spoke about cassettes and CDs and the records before, but let's talk about videotapes and how that actually changed your life for the better. How many years ago? 30 years ago? So you have a loving relationship with Pam, but tell us how you met.
I met Pam at my kids. She ran a video store, and they would rent the movies and forget to take them back. So finally, after a couple of times, I get a phone call saying, okay, you have 10, 11, 12 movies out, and they're 6 weeks late. And I had to go back home that night and recruit my kids, usually my son. I said, Rocky, get all these tapes back, because I know they're not at our house. They're all at his friends' houses. Get them back here tonight so I can return them to the video store. And she was very kind with me when I returned them all. I asked her out on a date, and she said she couldn't go with me. I didn't realize that she was a one-person store in a store, so that's why she didn't go. So, but she did call me up the next day. I think it was, invite me to an Indians baseball game, and the rest is history. I'm got two speeds when it comes to getting married. I guess slow and slower. It took me a few years, but I finally proposed to her in Las Vegas. We had a wonderful time. Our engagement was announced by Little Richard on the stage at a Las Vegas show with a little urging of my union brothers, and it was just a lot of fun. And Pam and I have been together. We're partners in crime. We go to everywhere together. She'd be here with me today, but she was not feeling well today. But we traveled together. We traveled with the union all over the place. We traveled as legislators all over the world. We got to visit Israel and Puerto Rico. We traveled through Canada. And I can't tell you how many different major cities throughout the United States together. And we had so much fun. And the Republicans thought so much of my wife that they named her Senator number 34. And so many other people know that we only have 33 senators in the state of Ohio. So they thought that was kind of neat. And the one story I love telling was when we were in Israel, we were going to stay at 3 different hotels during that 9-day visit. And we got to the second one, and it was by far the most prestigious hotel I've ever been in. And I couldn't believe when I walked into the first room and just see the living room, how large it was. And then the master bedroom was just as large, and the bathroom was almost as large. And all of them had like 90-inch TVs in them. And on every TV screen, it said, "Welcome, Pam Yuko." So I know that, you know what, the respect goes both ways when it comes to my family. It goes with me and Pam.
So your wife is your big supporter, but
She is.
So was your team in the politics, right? Tell us a little bit about the dynamics there.
You know what? Well, it started out with the unions. When I first announced I was running for state representative, I started going to all the unions, and they all said, "Of course, we're going to support you. You know, we want a union voice in the State House, and you're our best example." So I got the full support from there. I was very active with politics I ran a political division at the union, so I got to know all the politicians. So I got their endorsements as well, and then I just made it a point to visit as many businesses and fire stations and police stations and city halls that I could, and meet as many people as I could, and that just transpired into more and more support that I got. Never lost an election, and elected minority leader 3 times by my colleagues, never, and unanimously all 3 times. So I figured I must be doing something right. So I maintained that for my entire political career. And again, once you get in office, then you start working with people. When we did the medical marijuana bill, for example, the Senate president insisted I have a Republican do the bill with me. And I said, well, I'll find somebody. He said, no, I will appoint you somebody. And he appointed me Senator David Burke, who was a Republican, but a very, very conservative one, did not believe in medical marijuana. He did not believe in anything else that we were fighting for. He was a pharmacist by trade, and he owned his own pharmaceutical company. He had the most to lose if we passed this bill. And at our opening press conference, he introduced himself as the most pessimistic person in the room. And he said, I'll introduce Senator Kenny Yuko. He's the most optimistic person in the room. But if he were to walk in here today, he might tell you Kenny still might be the #1 optimist for medical marijuana. He said, but I'll be #2. We did a listening tour all over the state. We visited over 500 homes. We met with so many wonderful people. Unfortunately, I had to go to about a dozen funerals already of children mostly who died because they didn't get all the health care that they needed for their diseases. And they passed away. But before they passed away, the medical marijuana we gave them stopped seizures from 50, 75, 100 every day to maybe 1 or 2, and they were mild by comparison. So I know what we did was a great thing, but it still hurts when you go to a funeral and you see a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl or a little boy sitting in a casket, because that's not the way it's supposed to be.
But you weren't a fan of the medical marijuana to begin with either, weren't you?
Well, I didn't know about it. You know, when someone first approached me at dinner and said, "Are you Kenny Yuko?" And I said, "Yes." "Are you running for state rep?" And I looked at the button. I had Kenny Yuko for state rep. And "Yes, I am." She said, "What's your thoughts on medical marijuana?" And I laughed. And she said, "Why did you laugh?" I said, "Why did you say medical marijuana?" And I said, "That's Cheech and Chong, Willie Nelson, George Carlin. That's marijuana. You put a medical word with it." But I said, she told me I was ugly, stupid, and she hoped I lost the election. I said, "Well, give me a chance." I did some research, found out that it helps people with multiple sclerosis. And this is in 2003. In the year 2000, I had a stroke. I was in a hospital, and then they came into my room one night, and they said that I had multiple sclerosis as well. And didn't even know what it was. It's a scary thought when you think about some of the people, how it affects everybody differently. But I knew it could have affected the way I talk, the way I walk, the way I live, or if I lived. And so I realized that, helping people with different illnesses, if medical marijuana was the way, I found out through my research that Israel was probably the most active country in supporting medical marijuana, and they were light years ahead of everybody else. But quickly we were catching up. And as we got closer, 8 years in the House, I couldn't get it passed. I was offered 2 years, came back in 2015, and we passed it in 2016. And it was through an awful lot of effort, talking to awful lot of people, mostly my Republican colleagues, explaining to them how I visited their constituents. And when you hold a baby in your arms and she's 13 months old and she's having a seizure in your arms, that's something you'll never forget. And I know that with a little bit of cannabis oil and we put it underneath her bottom lip, we can stop that seizure. I knew we were on the right thing, and we passed it.
So if you would still be in politics, what projects would you now be campaigning for?
Well, we have a president right now that's on a whirlwind mass destruction campaign, so to speak. The programs that he's shutting down, making sure that all of our kids go to school, they have food in their stomachs. Because believe it or not, despite this great land we live in, not every child has breakfast or lunch or even dinner. So we have to feed them, and those programs are being taken away. We have to fight that. They're fighting right now. They're trying to take away our medical marijuana and recreational marijuana program that we passed in Ohio, and voters voted or overwhelmingly to support that. They're basically trying to destroy it. And I don't know why, but they're going to force these programs to leave Ohio or go out of business, or force our residents of Ohio to go to other states to purchase their product because they know it'll help them. And that's not what you want. You want to attract people to your state. You don't want to push people out of the state. So there's a lot of programs that, instead of starting something new, I would be spending most of my time right now defending and protecting what we already passed and trying to keep it intact, because everything we pass is for the good and the betterment of all Ohioans, and that's what we wanted to do.
And do you feel like the young generation is as engaged as you were and your generation, or do you feel like the generation shift also influences the political engagement?
Well, it's a different generation. They have these cell phones, they have TikTok and Twitter and Facebook, and they share so many different comments with so many different people. They listen to so many people that aren't telling the truth, the inaccuracies that are portrayed as the gospel or anything but the gospel, and we need to change these things. We need to get the truth out there and need to get them involved. The voter turnout isn't as what it should be for young people, and again, getting people through grade school to high school to college, and then keep them in Ohio as they get their employment opportunities. These are all the things we want to do, and as they're raising their families, we want them to become part of our Slovenian groups and our Hungarian groups and our German groups, our Polish groups. We still have nationality pockets throughout our state and our city here. We have the Slovenian pocket, we got the Croatian pockets, we got the Polish pocket out there in Parma, and we want to build on that. We don't want to let it fall apart.
Nicole, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. So thank you for all of our participants who have been sending in messages. We have a question here about immigration. Can you discuss the similarities and differences between those who immigrated from Slovenia to America when your grandparents did versus those who are immigrating to the U.S. today?
That's a great question, because obviously that's the question that everyone's been talking about. Right now we have a program going on in our country that are, I think, unfairly telling people of all nationalities that, you know, a lot of them, you need to go back where you came from. When my grandparents came over, it was a different thing. It was a land of opportunity over here, or so they thought. That was the message that was being portrayed throughout Europe. If you want a better quality of life for your family, move to America. Jobs are here, better homes, better food, better opportunities. And they came here. They didn't take away jobs because the jobs were abundant as our country grew in size and popularity. And, you know, again, they were here before World War II, and it was post-World War II when the baby boomers really exploded our population. But you look right now, what's happening right now, we're seeing people working in the wineries in Lake County and Ashtabula County. And a lot of them are from Mexico and Puerto Rico, and a lot of them go back to Mexico in the wintertime and come back in spring to continue working. My concern is a lot of those businesses that have built up tremendously over the years, they're going to have a hard time finding employment. A lot of our landscapers that cut our lawns for people all over our great state of Ohio, most of them employ people that are from Mexico. And again, they come in, they work all summer, and then they leave. When we're sending them back and we won't let them come back, who's going to cut the lawns? It's not as easy and foolproof as being portrayed by Washington. And we need to do everything we can do to make sure that people that have come here, and I got to meet so many of them in Fairport Harbor and Paynesville. We have a very strong Hispanic population. They're great people. They really are. And they don't have 2 cents to their name, but I would go visit them at their home. The first thing they do, they want to feed me. They want to drink, give me something to drink. They want to take care of me. And they have virtually nothing. But that's the way they are. They're very willing to share everything that they have with people. And, you know, my grandparents were accepted, you know, other people were. My mom's parents came from Ireland, and again, they settled, they had a big family, but employment was different back in those days. Right now, seems the way we're trying to do more with less, and that's not good for people coming in overseas.
We have another question from Caitlin on Facebook. Cleveland seems to be growing and getting more and more recognition every year. What are you most excited about for the future of Cleveland?
Well, you look at the state of Ohio, and you look at who has the Great Lakes on their border, okay? And it's not Columbus, it's not Cincinnati, it's not Dayton, it's not Youngstown. It is Cleveland, and it is Toledo. I think Cleveland has made the most of their geography, where we're at right on the shores of Lake Erie. What we've done a great job of creating a strong, vibrant downtown. My casino bill, like I said, the 4 communities or 4 counties who hosted the casinos, they got a bigger portion of the revenue. And what Cleveland did was they've invested all that money into downtown Cleveland. You saw the hotels move up there. We got the professional baseball, we got basketball, we got football, maybe. We have women's basketball, but we got the Art Museum, we got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we got the Polka Hall of Fame in beautiful downtown Euclid, Ohio. We have so much to offer. We have different ethnic groups. We can go to Little Italy, we can go to Chinatown, we can go to get a pierogi in Parma, you know, all over the place, and get ethnic foods that you really enjoy. When you have all that together, and you're seeing where everyone left downtown Cleveland years ago, back in the 50s and 60s, they're moving back downtown now, because places like the May Company, where I worked at one time, 50-some years ago, they're all condos and apartments right now, and people are enjoying that. You're seeing that they're paying more attention to downtown, you know, the public square area. Safety is always an issue, but restaurants are popping up left and right. They're taking that 4th Street, making it an entertainment district. And when you start doing that, you're going to attract more people. But the dynamics of it change. When my parents settled in Euclid, it was because they wanted to raise a family there. When we outgrew the bungalow, we moved to Lyndhurst because we could build a bigger house. When you're living in a small condo, you can't add on a family room in the back of the house because you're living in a condo. So it's mostly single people, or else moms and dads who don't want to be a mom and dad. They're very happy just being a married couple. So that changes things.
We have another question here. What advice do you have for the next generation of Slovenian-Americans?
Get involved. Get involved. Get involved at your different nationality groups. We have a tremendous parade coming up on Saturday. Last year, the parade and the event, the whole day was just absolutely phenomenal. And it just wasn't all the Slovenians that were down there. All kinds of people were down there that I knew, and they were down there. We saw them. Music was abundant. Food was all over the place. It was absolutely wonderful. But get involved and keep involved. And we have so many wonderful events. We celebrate Slovenian Independence Day, but we do it not only with the Slovenians, we do it with other nationality groups as well. We stay involved. I was appointed by the Senate President, believe it or not, to serve on the Eastern European Affairs Commission. And myself and Joe Valencic, representing the Cleveland area, we go down to Columbus and we meet and we talk with Suzana came by and she gave a nice, beautiful speech to our group a couple months ago, in October, I believe it was. And we're going to invite other consul generals as well to come by and address our group. We're going to talk about what we can do to help our businesses maybe expand and broaden in Europe, so we can maybe get somebody moving over here to Slovenia, or vice versa, bring them back over here. We do have Ljubljana as a sister city for Cleveland, and we want to do that with more cities and more ethnic backgrounds.
And we have one last question here. You had mentioned your long-lasting marriage. What advice would you give to those who are looking for a similar long-lasting relationship?
Well, marry someone you love, marry someone that you get along with, have similar interests and shared interests. I can say, Pam, you want to go here? And I already know the answer. She said, of course I want to go there, And we travel together. We travel very well. Be respectful. I know she goes to bed a little bit earlier than I do. I'm a night owl. I don't require a lot of sleep. I make sure I give her a kiss on the forehead every night before I lay down in the bed. But tell her I love her, and vice versa. And that's the success of it. When you treat each other with kindness and respect, and then you take that lesson, and because you're making a success out of your marriage, and you change that into the way you work, and the way you live, and the people you meet, and the neighbors. I mean, you can make a lot of good things happen.
But it took a while for you to get there, right? With Pam, I mean, like you weren't that involved in the beginning, or were you?
Well, we weren't, because I worked an awful lot of hours with the union. I had the entire state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And of course, when I retired from that, I became a state representative. And I knew I wanted to be there for unions. And I said, okay, I'm going to be the union guy down there. Well, after leaving there after 18 years, and I'm cleaning up my office, I said, this is a beautiful, they named me Legislator of the Year for this. Healthcare, and I put it down. And look at this one. Oh, healthcare. I had 18 awards, and 17 of them were for healthcare. And I got one Lifetime Achievement Award from the Ohio AFL-CIO for my work with the labor organizations. And I thought I went down there to be the voice of unions, but I wound up, because you know what? All the work I did with different healthcare organizations, it benefited our union families and the kids growing up. And that's what I wanted to do. Make sure that wherever my voice was going to be heard, it would do so for the benefit of others, and not just be a loud-winded politician that we have too many of in this day and age.
Is there something that we haven't asked you that you want to share with the audience before we close off this session? I don't want to say session, discussion.
Well, you know what, Suzanne? First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this, and thank all these wonderful people for making this happen. This is a great thing. It's a great opportunity. What I've seen and how I've watched people grow up. Just the other day, Pam and I came home in the afternoon. We visited a friend who's going to be turning 103 on March 28th, and Jean Donovan from Lake County. And she just moved into a nursing home. We had lunch with her. We went up to her new apartment and everything. We came home, and as I'm driving home, I heard a song on the radio that reminded me of a couple that, in fact, they were godparents to my son Rocky. And Al had passed away years ago, and I called up his wife, Zena, and she says, Kenny, my God, what's this with this phone call? It's so nice. I'm so happy that you called. And I said, well, I heard a song that reminded me of you and Al, and I thought when I got home, now's no better time than to call Zena Thompson and say, Zena, how are you doing, and check in on her. We wound up talking for over an hour. And I do that often with people. Call up people that I haven't talked to in a while. And it's so nice. I'm notorious for writing notes. I'm old school. I love sending note cards and stuff like that to people. And I love their reaction, what happens when they see it. And these are things I want our kids to do. You know, to learn how to say thank you. Learn how to show appreciation. Know how to treat other people. And I tell my granddaughters, when you go to school, if you see somebody who's sitting all by themselves at recess time, go sit with that person, because nobody wants to be alone. And share with them. Make them come over. If they're eating lunch by themselves, pick up your lunch and go sit down and talk with them. And my one granddaughter just moved to a new school this year, and her second month there, she was named Student of the Month. And the teacher was calling up my daughter-in-law, explaining that the reason why they chose Frankie was because she's so helpful with all the other kids. She's like a little mother hen. My son died unexpectedly 3 years ago, so the kids were put into almost to a culture shock. But she came out of it rather quickly, and she wanted to help people because that's something her dad did all the time. And I know when I was with the union, I was there I was an officer for 25 years. I can tell you this, for 25 years, every single month, we did something for somebody. And sometimes it was very small. Sometimes it was just trimming bushes or cleaning up a yard, fixing a repair fence. Sometimes it was extensive. We had to build a wheelchair ramp one time, and the money we had to raise was unbelievable. We reached out to our union friends, contractors, reached out for contractors for help. They all delivered, and we were able to do so. And then all the volunteers made sure we got proclamations from somebody to show our appreciation. I went there personally to all their union meetings and presented the workers with these proclamations in front of their union sisters and brothers to show them how much we appreciate when the people volunteer and share your talents with other people. And we need more and more of that, and we don't get that. So, you know, you do your part, you try to make sure you do things, and you watch what happens when we did that. We did a final TV show when I was leaving office, my last day in office. And when we got done, the gentleman who was conducting the interviews, sitting in a chair, he was like in the middle room, he asked my 3 granddaughters if they wanted to come up and sit in the chairs on the stage there, and they said yes. So my oldest one, Dominic, went running for his seat, of course, and Frankie came over and grabbed my seat, and little Gabby, she walked over to where the Senate President was sitting, but he wasn't getting up. He was sitting there. And he looked at her and said, "You want to sit here?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you can't, because you're not the Senate President. This seat's only for the Senate President." And she just kind of looked at him. So he took off his Senate President pin and put it on her shirt. He said, "I am sorry, I didn't see your pin." So I helped her and put her on her chair. The smile on her face that day was priceless. And it was really nice. I also had a fundraiser for my caucus I threw at my daughter-in-law's restaurant in Little Italy. And my granddaughter came up to me and she says, "Gramps, how come everyone has a name badge but me?" I said, "Sweetheart, there at the end of the bar, there's a bunch of empty name tags and a magic marker. Write your name on it. Then you'll have a name badge on your shirt too." So I watch her. She walks over to the end of the bar and she climbs up on the bar and she's writing something. And next thing you know, she comes back, she's standing next to me. And I looked down at her and she had a name badge on. It said, "Frankie Yuko, Vice President." I said, "What's this Vice President stuff?" She says, "I just want to be I don't want to be president. I just want to be Vice President." But you know what? We throw a fundraiser in memory of my son every year, call it Run, Rock, Run. They always ask me to say a few words before we start the run. And Frankie will always say, "Gramps, can I talk to?" And the very first time we did it, I said, "Of course you can." I put her up on a chair by the podium we had there, handed her the microphone. And she said, "Well, hold on one second, Gramps." She reaches in her back pocket, pulls out her cell phone. She goes, "I wrote a speech." But, you know, she put it down. She never looked at that speech one time. And she delivered a beautiful speech. When I was in Columbus, and one of my farewell parties, the biggest one, there were a couple hundred people there, I think, and room was just jam-packed with people. And I was giving my farewell speech, and I see my wife going, she wants to go and talk. So I said, "Before I go, I want to introduce my granddaughter, Frankie. Frankie, come up here. Do you want to say a few words?" And she jumped up on stage. I put her on her chair, and she spoke for about 7 minutes and gave a beautiful speech, talking about how proud she was of her Gramps and everything that he did, and how happy she is to come down to Columbus and spend some time with us at the State House. And, you know, I'm hoping that that's what led her to becoming a good example for the other students at her school, that gave her the award of being the Student of the Month. You know, when you come into a new school and you're in the 4th or 5th grade, whatever she's in, it's difficult. You know, you can't automatically just fit in the group. The other kids have all been together since kindergarten, perhaps. You're coming in, you're the odd person out. but she managed to put herself right in there and fit in with everybody. And I like to think that's because the way she saw my son treat people and the way she sees me treat people, and it's a good thing.
So maybe she's the future politician.
I think she will be.
Yeah.
I think she will be.
I think we can close off. Thank you so much, Kenny, for sharing your life story with us, and above all, the message of kindness and of uplifting each other. And you've for sure done this for your community, and I hope we all get this message and carry it with us in the future. Nicole will now give us a short update on the events that follow at Kurentovanje. And before she starts, just a reminder that we are, as a consulate, co-organizing some events with Kurentovanje. Nicole will tell us more about it. But then we also have a movie screening on the 8th of March called Family Therapy at Cinematheque. So the first 2 people that will share our post for this movie on Facebook and tag us will get 2 free tickets.
And that is with the Consul General's.
Yeah, that is the Facebook of the Consul General of Slovenia. Apologies for that.
So we have many events this year. Right now online, we have, for the duration of the week, Carnival King of Europe 2.0 is an online documentary, and you can get the link for that by registering on our website, and then we will send you the link in order to view that documentary. We have tomorrow scheduled a cooking demonstration to learn how to make schnitzel and cinstan krompir, which is a traditional Slovenian potato dish. On Tuesday, we have our Slovenian wine tasting night. Join us for a tasting of 5 wines, complimentary food included, and a take-home souvenir tasting glass. The 27th, we have an in-person movie. This is going to be screened at the Idea Center downtown in downtown Cleveland, and it is a road tripping movie. It is comedic, and there are tickets, free tickets, but they are limited, so please do reserve your tickets online. On Friday, join us at St. Martin de Porres School in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood for a celebration of women in science. There is an exhibit highlighting women in science throughout Europe, and we will also have a panel discussion where we will have a Slovenian scientist who is featured in the exhibit joining us for a panel discussion. Then March 1st is our main festival and parade. We start that day off with a 5K walk or run. Please register online for that. And then there are many events happening throughout the day, March 1st. The doors or gates open at Slovenian National Home on St. Clair at 10 o'clock. We have a parade that steps off at noon and many other activities. There are 4 stages of live music, traditional food, drink, and vendors, and a 2,000 square foot children's village filled with all kinds of free activities for the young ones. Check out everything online at clevelandkurentovanje.com. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the rest of our events this coming week.